Hi, this is Video Nurse. My name is May, and I am a nurse in the state of Washington. I'm also a licensed mental health counselor. And I don't come onto Video Nurse and try to diagnose or treat anybody, but I do try to share with the community a little bit about a certain topic and then invite people to come into the chat room, which is on ustream.tv/video-nurse, where on Mondays at 5 p.m. PST time, I'm usually on here chatting about some subject about health or mental health, trying to help people and get some conversations going while we're in a down economy. Getting free healthcare advice is pretty cool. We are talking about a not so happy subject, but I thought I would do a bonus round and show you a little bit of my home. Here I'm sitting on a chair that's exactly like the chair that's in my office in Pioneer Square, that's in Seattle, Washington. It's got this cool little section in the back where you can have a drink, pull down this tray. We're not going to be doing that here. We're going to talk about something that makes some people feel like drinking: grief, death, loss, and of course suicide. Now in my house I have a little piece of art here. It's on my table. Some people will recognize this. It is a type of knife. Now this is not a particularly sharp one, but if I were to take a piece of paper, I could actually cut something with it. And I bought this knife to remind me artistically that every day each one of us has a choice. We can choose to live and make a commitment to live really well, or we do have the option to choose to take our own life, and some people do that for various reasons. We're in a down economy, and a friend and fellow journalist had connected with me earlier this year asking questions about my thoughts as a psychotherapist on the increased numbers of those who have attempted or committed suicide in the past year and a half because of the economy. Now, of course, there's a lot more reasons why people might want to take their life besides the economy, but definitely the economy has something to do with the increased numbers. One is because people are getting their backs pressed to the wall and embarrassed or feeling intense shame about what's happening to their families because they've lost their job or they don't have the ability to provide for themselves. And some of you may have heard about a man who lost his job and went home, killed his wife and his 2 children. Just didn't want to put them through the shame that he felt that they would go through if he wasn't able to get another job, and he felt that he couldn't. He was very depressed and therefore killed himself and killed his family. That's pretty extreme out there, but you may know somebody who's been talking about suicide or very, very depressed and perhaps has hinted that maybe you wouldn't care so much if they just weren't around. Or maybe this would be a good solution to the pain that they're feeling. And I'm here to tell you about the many different reasons why people might be talking this way, and 2, what you can do to help others. Now, there are many reasons why people may contemplate suicide. 1 is the loss of a loved one and deep feelings of abandonment. 2, the end of a relationship and very strong emotions about whether or not that person feels that they can go on without that special person in their life. Number 3, a history of depression and suicide in the family. It's true that when one person commits suicide, the other family members are deeply affected, and maybe close to that time of suicide or on the anniversary of that suicide, other family members may feel like they want to join the one who left them. Number 4, a change of economy, the loss of a house, job, and family members. Like I mentioned before, shame and embarrassment play a big factor for some people in their thoughts about wanting to leave. Number 5 would be stress combined with extreme feelings of shame and fear of failure, particularly in men. And that's one of the reasons why you also see that men, if they're going to commit suicide, often choose a very lethal form, like hanging or using a gun. They really don't want any options to be discovered or to take pills and wake up in the hospital. They want it just to be over. Number 6, chronic physical pain or the change in one's mobility, appearance, or health status. It makes a person consider his or her quality of life as not something she or he wishes to continue. So let's say that you come back from their life war and you've lost a leg and you feel that you're just not the person you were before, and life is very difficult and very hard, and sometimes people can feel very depressed and think that suicide is an option that might change some of those things. What do you do if somebody you know starts hinting about suicide? Well, as a nurse, I would tell you, one, take those thoughts that somebody's sharing with you very seriously. Do not laugh them off. Listen. Number two, the person is usually very ambivalent about life and about death. So you want to listen very carefully, not make a joke of it, and help them talk about it so that maybe you can get to some of the reasons why this person would want to stay alive. Number three, get the person help early. It's better for you to be safe and not sorry by getting the person some help, and then they say, well, I wasn't really serious about it. Okay, fine. You guys can joke about it later. Get them help. Number four, discourage the person from drinking alcohol or taking drugs. One, they're just trying to medicate what hurts. But two, it might lower their inhibitions enough that they're actually acting on thoughts that they have, those very dark thoughts that say, I just want to end this all. And it helped them over the ambivalence, but not in a way where they have, their logic pulling on their side. So you want to make certain that they're not going to go on a drinking binge or take drugs so that they can't make intelligent choices for themselves. And now there's an online article that you could take a look at. I'm just going to quickly summarize over it, but it's on the Mayo Clinic, MAYO clinic.com / and put in the word suicide. And you should get a long article with two sections, one for adults and one for teens talking to teens about suicide. And you can go through their checklist, but first they say, start by asking the person some questions. Ask them, have they been thinking about suicide? Don't dance around the word. Just say it. Have you been thinking about leaving? Have you been thinking that maybe nobody would notice if you were gone? And that will help that person say, yeah, I actually have. Ask them, do they have, if you were to do this, do you have a plan? Do you have a way that you were going to do this? Do you know when, approximately, you would do this? And then actually a person can tell you. They're not going to say, oh, I'm not going to tell you. If they're ambivalent, they actually want to talk about it. And so they'll tell you if there's a plan. And if there's no plan, less likely that they're going to act on it. They don't know how they would do it. And if there is a plan, you can see how realistic that plan is. If they say, oh, I just take a gun and blow my brains out, you could ask them, where's the gun? And so you could see if they actually have a lethal means to take themselves out. If they say, I'm going to take some aspirin, and all they have in their house is, 2 aspirin left in a mostly empty bottle, it's not likely that they're going to be able to hurt themselves with that. But if they had 2 bottles of aspirin, absolutely. So you want to see what they have around them. Look for warning signs. Warning signs would be somebody talking about suicide and making remarks such as, I wish I were dead, I wish I hadn't been born, or if I were to die, it would make all this pain go away. Look for things like dramatic mood swings. Look for the preoccupation about death, dying, or violence. See that's coming up over and over in their speech. Look to see if they're using alcohol and drugs. Again, that's just another means of trying to medicate pain. And third, you really need to get people emergency help. So be aware that there's a crisis line in the area. You can get on that crisis line and get your friend to talk to somebody who's a professional to coach them through what they need to talk about and see if they need additional help. See if you need to be calling hospital to get that person in to see a professional to be watched for 24 to 72 hours if they're feeling very unsafe, if there's been a trigger that is making them think seriously about suicide, but that they don't want to do it. Try to find out if he or she is under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Again, so many times this is a part of the backdrop because it's changing the way the person's thinking and they're not in control of their faculties. So you really want to make certain if that's going on there. And then, of course, tell a friend or a family member right away what's going on. Get the family involved. Get them supportive with that person. One other little thing I want to talk about, because it's usually the part of the backdrop of somebody thinking about suicide, they talk about grief and depression and what the difference is. Grief is usually something that has a trigger, and it usually has a beginning and end. And grief can be because somebody died, and that's a natural outflow. It is a normal thing to feel grieved when somebody dies or when we're sad about something, a change, a loss, or a disappointment. So when somebody's grieving, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're suicidal. It's when that grief is unresolved and goes on and on and on. That's related also to depression. And depression, on the clinical side, it's this prolonged or intense expression of grief or hopelessness, and is often characterized by a repeated pattern of things like loss of energy, motivation, a change in eating or sleeping patterns, and a big dramatic change in the outlook of their life. It's just very dark. A friend of mine described depression as a big house where once the lights used to be on, and then as the person gets more and more depressed, they turn out all the lights in the different rooms until you, as the outsider, standing on the porch of the house of that person, and then even the outdoor light goes off, and you're sitting there and you can't get in. That is a sign of chronic depression. And usually at that level, the person has a change in their neurochemistry. That is, the neurons in their brain, two neurons, don't have enough neurotransmitter in the middle to help these neurons talk to each other. And so what happens is that they aren't able to modify their mood or to elevate their mood to any kind of place where most of us who don't feel these chronic depressions are able to do normally. So they either need medication to kind of help flood the gap between the neurons with neurotransmitter, or they need to do something else that would elevate it naturally, such as exercise, eating well, sleeping well, taking supplements to help. Vitamin D and sunshine are definitely things that help people who are suffering from depression. That's why we tell them to go on vacation, and we also up their vitamin D. Also talking about it with a psychotherapist, a professional counselor who can help them see why they're depressed and change some of their behaviors. It changes their thinking, which has a feedback loop and changes the way that they feel. Wrapping those all together, a depression can move somebody into thinking about suicide if they feel more and more hopeless. And if you treat the depression, you usually start seeing the person talk less and less about suicide as an option. Albert Camus did some writings about suicide, and he basically concluded that a response to the absurd in life really doesn't make suicide an option. He had this verdict that was very, very clear. The only courageous and morally valid response to the absurd is to continue living. That you can find on Wikipedia, looking under the name Albert Camus. Well, I'm Video Nurse. That's what I have to say about suicide, grief, loss, and depression. I hope you find better uses for something like this, like I do, a symbol to remind us to choose life. If you like what you're watching, please send your video response to Video Nurse here on my YouTube channel, Your Little China Girl, L-I-L China Girl. Or you can send me an offline response to videonurse@me.com. Look forward to your response, and thanks for watching.